You know you've been planting seeds for a while, and not only have you been planting seeds, your ancestors have been planting seeds. Just chill the fuck out and start harvesting what's actually already been sown.
This particular title is Keep It, Question It, or Let It Go. You have to work twice as hard to prove yourself.
Let it go.
Mm.
Just saying that's making everything in my body just, for what? Why? You guys don't make me come out in my Niger accent. Is everybody all right? Twice as hard. Let's rest.
What is one thing that people misunderstand about trauma?
Speaking about trauma puts us in victim mode. What is wrong with being a victim?
Welcome to Black Mentality, the space where we intersect our Black experiences with our mental health needs. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge and pay my respects to the traditional custodians of this nation and their elders past, present, and emerging. And I extend that respect to any First Nations people listening today. I'm coming to you from beautiful Darawa country. In all our conversations, it is important that we remember that sovereignty has never been ceded. It always was and always will be Aboriginal land.
Yemi, or Dr. Yemi, as I should put it, is an engineer, a TED talker, an entrepreneur, a researcher, and a global thought leader who really challenges people and organizations to think differently through what she calls rebellious curiosity. And I love that term. She's so passionate about trauma, leadership, identity, culture, and helping people turn pain into power. I'm so excited to have you here, Dr. Yemi. How are you
Oh my
today?
gosh, Dr. Tracy, just you saying my name, and I have to be honest, that has been I wish you could always do my introduction because I felt embodied. Usually I feel a bit shy, but I was like owning it, but only because you were saying it. So thank you so much for having me. I'm really, really looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, likewise. Well, I know there's a lot of people who already know you, but I want them to also get to know a different side of you. So I usually prepare a bit of rapid fire questions,
Okay.
but I'm sure it's very aligned to things you've been saying already online, and you've been actually very empowering to a lot of people. And I particularly love what you talk about the liminal space, and I'm sure you'll get into it as well. But for this moment, I just want to kind of hear your insights about this rapid fire questions. So, question
Okay.
one, what is one word that describes the season of life that you're currently in?
Harvest.
Ooh, yes.
Right, right.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that. I love that. Do you want to explain a little bit about that, or you just keep it
No,
light
so
as in harvest?
the last quarter of 2025 was so painful, and in part it was death of the ego, but there was so much pulling and tugging and wanting of
Mm.
stuff, and I kind of got a series of downloads, which was, you've been planting seeds for a while, and not only have you been planting seeds, your ancestors have been planting seeds. So and
Mm.
excuse my French, you might need to beat this out. Just chill the fuck out and start harvesting what's actually already been
Mm.
sown. It was very clear to me, which changes my energy. That's what I needed to change my
Mm.
energy to say, just be in the receival mode. Like that's the season I'm at. That it's
Mm.
growing. And I think
Yeah.
2 years before that, I was kind of given the guidance, don't start uprooting what you planted. Like, because you're gonna
Mm.
have to start all over again and be mindful of the people that are meeting you mid-evolution, not knowing that you've
Mm.
been planting these seeds from before.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the harvest was really important to me because it changes my energy. And rather than, oh my gosh, when is this coming? It is actually, yeah, let's go, let's go
I
pick.
love that. And you're
Yeah.
so right that your mindset shift really does impact a lot, right? So, like the fact that you were able to really kind of sit into this receiver mode has really
Yes,
been helpful for you to harvest a lot more of your fruits of
totally.
labor that you've planted a
Yes.
long time
Love
ago.
it.
I love that
Love
for
it.
you.
Fruits of labor. Yeah. See, these ain't so rapid, are they? I gave you the word and you was like, tell me more. But anyway,
I
let's go.
know. And this tends to happen all the time, I tell you. So, what's one belief that you had to unlearn to become who you are now?
One belief that I had to unlearn was my role as a woman in the world, and that is a big one. It was I
Mm.
thought my role as a woman was cook, clean, subservient, wrapped in the role of sister, daughter, mother, and wife.
Mm,
So that's probably
mm,
been the biggest one, which is a big part of my rebellious curiosity.
And where do you think that came from?
It would have come from culture, but also
Mm,
society and culture as a Nigerian woman who lived in
mm,
the UK. I remember an elder coming
mm,
over from Nigeria to our family home in the UK to give a talk to me because my mum had said, please tell Yemi that this is the rule of a mother of a woman. At this point, it was so foreign to me. I thought, wait, Auntie,
mm,
you come all the way from Nigeria to tell me I should learn how to cook stew for my future husband that may or may not come. It just actually felt, even though I may have seen it, it felt
mm,
odd to me that this is.
mm, mm,
And then I remember thinking, why are you sending me to uni? Why are you sending me to school? So I think there was already something that was happening, and I think that's a Nigerian culture, and I have no doubt will be across
mm,
cultures. But then I was
mm,
beginning to see it in the world, and once again, genuinely, if people can hear me, there is no shame in that. I just
mm.
knew there was more of my identity than that. And what a waste. I mean, I'm not
Yeah.
religious. I believe in an omnipotent presence, but I love the
Mm,
story in the Bible of the talents. Two
mm,
kids are
mm,
given talents and one buries and one uses it. It might be
mm.
skewed, but there's a big celebration for the one that uses it. And my
Yeah.
talents are way more than nurturer and,
Mm,
cook and everything else. So I think
mm,
it came from that because it just felt odd that that's what I was
mm.
effectively being raised and groomed to do when there were so many other
Yeah.
talents that I had.
Mm, mm. Firstly, costly advice, the fact that they had
Yeah,
to come all the way to the UK one. But I absolutely love how you rejected that norm because sometimes it's hard to break out of that kind of matrix, like, and the fact
yes,
that you said that I'm going to be courageous and break out of that usual kind of dialogue or narrative that we've been given or indoctrinated into to
yeah,
start actually searching and finding ways I can
yeah,
showcase my talents is actually
yes,
amazing.
yes. Oh, so
Completely
much
love
like
it.
that. But yeah,
Okay. What is one thing that people misunderstand about trauma?
within the Black mentality space,
Mm,
I think they misunderstand speaking about trauma as being in victim mode. I think,
Oh
I
my
think,
gosh, yes.
yeah, did that landed for you, didn't it?
That really landed because
Yeah.
I'm like, wow, that is actually so powerful because you're right. Like, there's just and like I'll let you continue.
No, but I
First.
loved what happened in your face. Like, this is what I love
Mm,
about what I do. I said it,
mm,
and I think your brain started to unpack it, and then there was a dum dum, as I call it. Like, there was
that
a, so I'm
epiphany,
all,
yeah.
right? So I'm almost really intrigued to know what that is. But I think that's what's really misunderstood is that, and which in itself makes me very curious of, oh, yeah, I just got my own download. Let's just say that we're true. Speaking about trauma puts us in victim mode.
Mm,
What is wrong with being a victim? Now, I
mm-hmm,
know that I
mm-hmm,
have an adverse reaction to being a victim, rightly or
mm-hmm,
wrongly.
mm-hmm,
I want to be seen as powerful, victorious. I don't want
mm-hmm,
anyone to try me because you will struggle more than I. So, and whether that is whether that is a healthy response, I don't
yeah.
know. But I
Mm,
think the biggest thing is that talking about it
mm,
feels like victim mentality and therefore makes a
mm.
lot of people uncomfortable or
Yeah.
angry.
Yeah, and just so right, and I think it's societal that leads us to
Mm,
feeling like we have to step away from talking about our trauma because for a long
yeah,
time, and I think not just subliminal messages, but very overt mainstream media,
yeah,
politicians, whether it be politicians, whether it's just like different narratives through movies or TV shows, they certainly tell us we need to stop talking about our trauma because we're
yeah,
always playing the victim card.
yeah,
So
yeah.
as soon as you said that, I was like, wow, it's so true, actually. I never viewed it from that point of view, even though I knew about it. But I think
But
it's just kind of sunk in a little bit more today.
actually, it's a good point. As you say that, I was beginning to think, however, I feel there's another group of people
Mm,
who are
mm,
not black, or if I can just maybe go straight and say white, who
mm,
sometimes they are rewarded for victimhood. So I
mhm,
think it
mhm,
depends
mhm,
on where you are at the intersection of identity, and how
mm,
it's perceived. And some of it is internalized. But
mm.
yeah, I just wanted to highlight that.
Yeah, no, no. So already having epiphanies at the beginning of this conversation. Love it.
Great.
Okay, what does rest look like for you?
Mm. Rest looks like nobody talking to me. Loving this chat, just to be very clear. To be honest, and this is probably more recent, rest for me in these moments looks like walking within nature. And if
Mm.
I can, without taking my phone, even if I'm not on my phone,
Yeah.
it's actually a weight. Like, just think about it.
Mm.
Like,
Mm.
even carrying keys is frustrating, but a phone in my pocket when I'm walking through nature, feels too weighty. Without the phone, it's just me, whatever animal is
Mm.
making noise, the greenery,
Mm.
the path, the people who I smile at, the
Mm.
cyclist I need to make space for. That for me is what
Mm.
what rest is.
That's amazing. And I love that. And when you say nature, are you talking about a bushwalk or are you talking about just the park?
Yeah, good. But
Because I was about to
oh,
say the safety element. How do
yeah, I
you
know.
navigate that?
Bushwalk, the way you say bushwalk, I'm like, wait, but are the animals, are they local? I'm going to say a very naturesque park where I know where my
Mm.
entry and exit points are. Because,
Yes.
my husband is a white guy and I know that we make a lot of jokes in it, but that dude has got me on more walks. But I
Yeah.
usually tell him, can you figure out the trail before you invite me?
Mm.
Because
Mm.
you and I have a different history within bushes. And so in these moments, if I'm on my own, it's a park that I know well, but usually
Mm.
it's and look, we're very blessed to have access to that. So it
Mm.
exists. I'm off to New Zealand next week, and I think then I'm going to explore a bit more about actually doing bushwalks and see what's possible.
Yeah, New Zealand is beautiful. And I can't I can definitely relate to like the bushwalks because I love being out in nature and hiking. And I've only, as much as I love being out there, I've only ever maybe hiked by myself um a handful of times, and that's when I
Okay.
still had my dog, just because of the safety
Okay.
element. Because I'm like, there's a
Yeah.
kind of multi-layered issue there of like being black firstly, and then being a woman,
A
so you
woman.
just don't
Yeah.
know what's out there, you know.
Totally.
So I
Totally.
certainly, but I enjoy it. Like I just wish I could do it a lot more, but I just don't
Yeah.
feel as safe enough to be able to go out in the bush by myself and just have that bushwalk.
You know what, and I'm glad you said that because I thought I was being overly sensitive. So I very recently, literally a week ago, similarly, just come back from Nigeria, and that was the one
Mm,
thing I missed. And I was in Lagos, and not the capital, but
mm,
was originally the capital, so very busy. And I was in the kind of not suburbia, but in the city, not necessarily on the outskirts. And I missed that. I missed the walks. I felt
mm,
so, I felt the
mm,
opposite of free and rest. So the only way
mm,
I could get my steps in was in the gym. And it made me
mm,
realize that that's actually a lifeline I need, that no matter where I live in the world, especially if I'm going to be there for more than a week, I have to be not too far from some sort of nature
mm,
reserve or park. So,
mm,
yeah, but then safety, because I could have gone for walks on the road, but it was safety.
mm.
It was safety of cars, safety of the
Yeah.
time, safety of the pollution.
Mm,
Yeah, and what a shame, because it's a privilege to have access to this natural
yeah.
part, and that sometimes we just underestimate how lucky we are.
Yeah, and you know what? You've just made me think as well that I would have anticipated in, let's say, Nigeria, because I'm Zimbabwean, I would have thought like Nigeria or even Zimbabwe would have those like natural spaces where you can just take a walk. But you're so right that like there's so many things you really have to consider before you say, okay, I'm just gonna put my shoes on and go for a walk outside.
But I know we're going everywhere, but you see, as you were speaking, I was thinking, okay, but why isn't that? Because,
Mm,
based on what we've heard, any place in Africa, you'd think, I mean, we
you
we
can
got
walk.
teeth for it. You got jungle, you got this. But what's happened, and I think part of it is colonial rule, was build, build,
Mm-hmm,
build. So that was a
mm-hmm,
way of showing economic growth. Now,
mm,
having worked as an engineer, working on projects, the first thing I have environmentalists do is we need a nature reserve. They now know the
mm,
importance of having this around
mm,
humans, which
exactly.
just gets lost in a place that has
Mm,
been colonized and has all been about production and efficiency.
exactly.
So I think there are
Yeah.
other parts of Lagos in Nigeria that's now realizing, okay, greenery is important,
Mm,
wellness is important. So,
mm.
a late addition for my generation, but glad that it's happening.
Yeah, definitely. And I love the fact that like they're prioritizing that within their architecture because I think it's
Yeah,
so important to have public spaces where people can just go out and be healthy. That's
totally.
really also a hallmark of what a healthy society actually looks like when you've got more
Yes.
green spaces. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But okay. Last one in terms of
Mm.
not so rapid
Rapid.
fire questions. If you could have dinner with any Black leader, dead or alive, who would it be?
Bell hooks.
Mm,
I know, and the reason why bell hooks, because if bell hooks was alive, it probably would be non-binary, just by the very notion that
mm,
she she managed to get society during and post death to make
mm-hmm,
sure her name was in small capitals as
mm-hmm,
part of her identity.
mm-hmm,
And I find that profound. And having read some of her literature as part of my research, considering considering how even her thought process in today's world would be
mm,
seen as completely out there, the fact that she
mm,
existed back then.
mm-hmm,
I'd love to sit at a table with her
mm,
and have conversation about the wisdom she had in this realm and other realms, because I just don't
mm.
think the potency of her work could exist without access to something else.
Agreed, agreed. No, she has just an amazing array of literature she's been able to impart to everyone. And I
Yeah.
know for me, I was actually having a conversation with someone about this. We're trying to decide what our favorite Bell Hooks text is. And I think initially
Oh.
I started off with All About Love because it sounds so cliche, but it
Mm,
really is such a great way, an introduction into just understanding that love is actually an antidote to a lot of things. It seems so
mm,
trivial, but to be honest, just the love as a verb is so prolific for a lot of people because it's like, oh, yeah, we know that love is a feeling, we express it, but if you're
mm.
not actually participating and acting on it, then you're not really kind of doing anything about it. So I
Yeah.
loved how she just made
Broke
mention
that
of that.
down. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. What about you? What's your favorite text?
Well, that's just it. As you were saying, I was thinking, is there actually anything of hers I've read in totality? And there isn't. And so I wonder
Mm,
whether I got that download as an introduction to go and search for something. Because I quoted her in
mm,
my research, but my memory won't even let me. Obviously, my research was about transforming cultural trauma, and there was something around
mm,
identity. But I honestly, I can't remember. I'd been making something
mm,
up. But something says I need to read more of her literature. So,
mm.
considering I've already preempted, we're going to have a part two. I will
Yeah.
come back into the part two of the interview and share more of that.
Excellent. I love it. I love it. Okay. Well, if there's anything that you would like to share with the viewers about your story, please do so as well. Now's the time. If you've got
Now's the
anything else
time.
that that's not out there, or even if it's out there, to reintroduce them
Mm,
into your work, because you've done so well
mm.
to actually articulate your story online.
I think the best thing I'd probably share is whatever picture or story you might be trying to make up of me, it don't. It's
Mm.
the best way to describe it. Um,
Yeah.
because I'm figuring it out.
Mm,
I'm really figuring it out, and I'm figuring it out in the most exploratory, evolutionary, graceful, kind way. You know, when I
yeah.
want to give words to it, I say I'm an engineer by first profession, an entrepreneur by passion, and a curious rebel by mission.
Mm,
Now, because we live in a world where, and this does frustrate me, we have to pay bills and just really be distracted by these adult things instead of living our
mm,
true creativity.
mm-hmm,
The name I'm willing to give myself is a cultural alchemist. I'm very interested in all
mm,
forms of culture and saying, well, how can we transmute this into something powerful and for the betterment of
mm,
humanity? And there's a lot
mm,
in that. And this is why I say, don't, try to figure me out by just coming on a journey with me. If you're listening to this and
mm,
you're like, oh, wow, that's interesting. I never thought about it that way. Lean in.
mm,
And when you're ready to tap
mm,
out, tap out.
mm,
Have no expectations of me so that your feelings are not hurt when I don't meet it.
Yeah, I love that because that's like, firstly, I love the statement cultural alchemist. That's amazing. And then secondly, I love that you're saying I can invite you in, but at your own choice. I'm not
Yeah.
trying to kind of have an expectation that I'm going to be maybe held up on a pedestal or being
Yes.
on the lower ground. I'm just myself. I'm a human at
Yeah.
the end of the day. So that's
And
amazing.
thank you. I had a strategy session with my strategist last week, and she
Mm,
knows that I irk. And even though it's not my words and he made a documentary, I don't want to be put on a pedestal. I
mm,
definitely do not believe I'm lesser than anyone, but I
mm,
don't. My work is to say, hey, I'm I'm happy to teach, but I'm also learning as long as you know that.
Mm,
And
mm,
if by all means the expression I give allows you to avoid depression, as we know, and you live
mm,
more fully, then great. And every now and again there
mm,
might be an offering I give you where there's an exchange. But I'm
mm,
I'm really ready to change the resource in which I exist or exchange.
mm,
And I don't have
mm,
the wording fully yet on that, but that's what's becoming clear for me in this season of my life.
mm. Yeah, no, it's fascinating to hear your self-reflection and just the way that you've actually managed to distill your identity at this point to everyone
Yeah.
else. So it's actually amazing.
And 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 I'm getting the ego coming in. I get this thing called downloads as I'm speaking.
Yeah.
The ego's coming in and people are saying, well, what the hell do you want me to do with that? Like, what are you? Why have you been invited to this podcast? You
Mm,
know, I did study engineering. I started my own
mm,
consultancy. I've opened up a gym, a
mm,
cafe, and then I failed in one of them, closed one down, made documentaries, written a book, done some work with the
mm,
United Nations. I say all of that towards the end,
mm, mm,
because those are, yes, the physical materialistic things. But one thing I operate with, and I did this in when I used to do vision board workshops, is be, do, have. Who do I want to be? What do I want to
mm,
do? And what do I want to have? I always like
mm,
to be experienced through who I'm being before I tell
mm.
you what I've done and what I have.
And that's amazing because I think to a degree you're also really challenging people's assumptions, which is that you need to
Yes.
lead with your accolades or the things that you've done. Because
Yeah,
even with my
correct.
introduction, I was like, I actually really just like you, and I really wanted to have you on the podcast firstly before even reading the list of everything. So I was like,
Yeah.
okay, but still, but you're right that most people lead with what they've done or the value that they see or people perceive to see
Yeah.
them in the world. So you certainly I love your approach, which is let's kind of do things in reverse. And let's start off
Yeah.
by everything else, and then I'll tell you what I've done.
Actually, yeah, thank you. That was actually really healing. That was really healing
Mm,
for me. And maybe I'll share offline because I every now and again I think, yeah, I mean, you showing up the way you should. If you want to get more engagements and bookings, you should be sharing what you've done. And maybe
mm,
that's a message to myself. Stay in the be. I'd
mm,
love for people to come to have a conversation with me just because you want to, not because I opened
mm.
up a gym or because
Yeah.
I've won an award or because I'd like, actually, I just love experiencing and co-creating with this person when we get into
Mm,
space like that. I actually think that's where we're heading to with as AI. I'm
mm,
not afraid of AI, but
mm.
even as the world, even with everything going on in the world, I think it's going to be how we experience each other.
Yeah.
And not that we are a 5 times Grammy winner, that is all valid, or
Mm.
New York's best time seller. I think
Yeah.
that will become secondary.
Definitely. And I think human connection is something that will always predate
Yes,
AI. And
totally.
that's okay because I love AI too, but I'm also mindful of a lot of the impacts, whether it's psychological, environmental, that it does
Yes.
have. So it's
Yeah.
just being mindful around that. Okay, we
Mm,
want to transition a little bit into a bit of a game. I
okay.
like to do this with all the guests, and generally the game is aligned to a lot of the work that you're probably doing. And I always feel quite smug because I come up with titles that I think are so ingenious. But you let me know. But essentially, this particular title is Keep It, Question It, or Let It Go. And I feel like it's kind
Keep
of
it what,
tied,
sorry?
Keep It, Question It, or Let It Go.
Okay. 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 Yep.
Yeah, and the idea is based on your rebellious curiosity kind of frame, just
Okay.
around is this something that's serving me or do I need to let it go? Am I in that liminal space in a way?
Okay. Oh,
So
I
what I'll do
like.
is I will share a belief or a mindset or just a saying that maybe people have grown up hearing. And then what I want to for you to do is determine whether we should keep it, question it, or let it go completely. That
Okay.
way our audiences maybe can also play in as well. But I would
Okay.
also love if you can maybe explain a little bit after I've kind of
Okay.
you've shared what your response is to that
Yeah.
particular statement.
Love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, good. All right. Starting with, I feel like I know what you'll say to this, but still, you should never disappoint your family.
I know you might think I was going to say let it go, but I'd say
Mm,
question it in the first instance.
okay, love it. Yeah.
Just because, I mean, I want to make it clear, everything in my body as as a student says let it go. As a
Mm,
teacher, it's question it. because there's usually a reason why, something might happen, or you've done something or not done something that disappoints. I'm always interested in the history. This is where the rebellious
Mm,
curiosity is. I'm always interested in the history. And the only reason, even though it does not become your responsibility to own whatever it is so you don't disappoint them, it is so you have the information to propel forward. That's the only
mm,
reason why I would question it. Um, why do I say the reason that comes in? I shared this story when I'm on stage. I've heard the story of the little girl who's cooking with her mum. The mum has this whole chicken. She cuts off the legs of the chicken and puts it in the pot to cook.
mm,
And the daughter's just asking her mum, why do you cut off the legs? And the mum just responds automatically, oh, because the legs have the least amount of nutrients. And the mum at this point thinks, I just BS'd this. I don't actually know if that's
mm,
true. Let me call my mum.
mm,
So the mother calls her mum and says, Mum, why did you used to cut the legs off the chicken? And the mum says,
mm,
oh, because we didn't have a pot big enough. And so the only way we could actually cook the
mm,
chicken was putting it in. Now, for me, that just gives, oh, there's way more in that. So just knowing that makes me think, okay, but now I live in a society that I can buy a bigger pot. So
mm,
that's the only reason why I put that. It's not so that you do things not to disappoint them, but so you
mm,
understand what was going on for them that would make them
mm,
think that's a disappointment, and then
mm.
reroute it to be to excel.
I love that. That's such a sage advice because it's like the natural inclination is let it go, let it go.
Yeah,
But
yeah, I
you're
know,
like,
I
no,
know.
let's question it. And you're right. I think in the first instance, it's always great to be reflective because part of
Yeah,
like what you've said, even that story with the pot, is that we become indoctrinated into these beliefs and into these customs or
yes,
traditions that we don't
yeah,
actually then challenge or even question, you know. And
yeah,
sometimes this is where all these things around gender norms remain, even though we know it's not serving quite a number of people. The patriarchy in
yes,
itself is so
yep,
unhelpful to men, but of
yep,
course it's being perpetuated, and because people
yes,
are not always questioning
correct.
that particular concept. Yeah. Okay, I love it.
Mm,
Okay, next one. You have to work twice as hard to prove yourself.
let it go. Uh-uh.
Mm.
Just saying that's making everything in my body just for what? Why? You guys don't make me come out in my Niger accent. Is everybody all right? Twice as hard. Let's rest. Especially Black
Yeah.
mentality. Our ancestors
Hmm.
did so much. I mean, even though I'm beginning to struggle with
Mm,
how it's done, but the Nat Bishop, Dr. Tricia Hersey, she, rest is the resistance.
hmm,
Coming across her work was really powerful for me of how important that is, which is why now when you said, how do I rest? It's so important
mm,
for me to the point that I think my kids are saying, how many times do you need to rest? And I'm now unlearning that rest is not laziness. So no, you don't, I know that there were times when you needed to, but where
mm,
we are right now, no, I do think we can be smarter, which is why I'm in a season of harvest, which is there's
mm.
enough working twice as hard. You've done a lot already. Let it go, boo. Let it
Yeah,
go.
definitely. And you're so right. And I like the fact that you quoted that rest is a form of resistance.
Yeah.
Because even for Black people, yes, the society, as much as it likes to say that we've progressed, there is still that expectation that we're supposed to be working twice as hard.
Mm, mm.
And oftentimes having to prove ourselves in these, whether it's paid employment or even like in some spaces as well, where if you're an entrepreneur. So certainly really
Yes.
important that you mentioned that. What happens in this house stays in this house.
Hey.
Because this one's loaded and you know it. Interpret it how you would.
Yeah. Ugh. So my brain has thought of many different things, but I'd question it. And let me
Mm,
give the reason why. When I became an Australian citizen, I posted on social media,
mm,
and one of the women in the family said, Yemi, be careful or don't do that. You don't want to tell everybody that you have dual citizenship. Because
mm,
there was a period that you couldn't have that
mm,
publicly. Who knows? It might still come to bite some of us. We all think, oh,
mm,
hunky dory now. In 10, 20 years' time, the things that were not illegal or wrong
mm,
could be. So
mm,
there are things like that. And once again, this is Black mentality. And this is
mm,
where our work is not easy because
mm.
we're progressing, but there was a reason why we didn't share things like that.
Exactly.
Also, because colonialism had really ruined and fractured a number of things that we had to do
Mm,
what we needed to do to survive. And I'm sure parts of the
mm,
world will say, oh, that's wrong. So was genocide when it comes to colonial. So no one can step
mm,
to me with that.
Mm,
But then there are other things, and this is where it gets tricky, which is why I say question it, which are just consistently harmful. And we just pass it generation to generation. It's funny because I'm going through a body revolution where, I'm working out, and I've always, well, not always, at least over almost 3 decades, I've really been into the body and fitness.
mm,
But I actually think I'm preparing to really challenge one of the things that happened in the house that we're not meant to repeat. Like, I feel like I'm
mm,
about to go on some sort of spiritual, psychological, cultural war. And I want to make sure that my body, which is the first port of defense,
mm,
and I'm actually questioning it. So I'm going to start off by questioning it, but I now know that um, I don't think it was ever for the betterment of us. So
mm.
question it, and you've got let it go. At some point, I'd like you to add another one and do something about it. Like I'd love that.
Yeah.
Like at some point, and I don't think it's for
Mhm.
everything, but I think there's do something about it, which is where I'm at. So
Mm,
I'd say question it to figure out what the next action is.
No, and that's so powerful, particularly around just how I think from how you were describing, it sounded like the traumas that we experience as Black people. And
Mm,
oftentimes the response has always been to try and keep everything within the household because we don't
yeah,
want to have any uh, additional kind
outside.
of threat kind of happening or
Yeah,
outside influence coming in.
yeah.
And
I,
I find that like
mm.
that's what's happening these days. Yeah. Sorry,
It
go on.
is, and I do have to say it's and this is where, and I know you sent that article that I'm vaguely calling back, which is
Mm,
being trauma informed when it comes to, for me now, if I'm doing any course now, I need to
mm,
know, firstly,
mm,
what teachings are you using? Who's teaching it?
mm,
How trauma informed are you? How culturally
mm,
informed are you? How culturally trauma informed are you? Whichever the way is, this is all
mm,
really important to me because
mm,
I know that calling the police or reporting me as a Black woman or worse, a Black man to any form of like whatever they're called, services, social services like police or whatever, or tax, is way more dangerous for me than someone else.
yeah.
So where my
Mhm.
white counterpart might do something, as my kids and my daughter in particular, when she was on the train and she was still at secondary school, they're evading the fare, they're not tapping. The
Mm,
inspector comes and asks her, show me your travel card, but not her friends. So if a woman on the
wow.
train goes to report someone who's white and someone who's Black, it's two different circumstances in
Mm,
most
mhm,
countries for them. So
mm,
similarly in the home. Um,
mm,
the law enforcement has not always been kind in the Western world to Black and
mhm.
brown bodies.
Yes,
So
very much.
once again, you've got to question. You've got to question this, and it's complicated because a lot of us are in
Mm,
diaspora. We're trying to
mm,
hold on to some of our cultural thinking in a Western world.
mm,
It's yeah, it's
mm.
complex.
No, thanks so much for sharing that because you're wow and being vulnerable around just what your daughter went through because you're so right that like there's so many forms of racial experiences and discrimination that is still going on in Australia and the fact that like authorities can still have such an oppressive tactic when
Yeah,
dealing with black and brown bodies is so it's important to be able to talk about it.
yeah, and I just
Mm,
because something always tells me to always give a balance where I can. I remember once driving and I got stopped and
mm,
it was in a place in a very because I live in a part of a suburb, one of the places I live where it's quite affluent.
mm,
Obviously predominantly white, high Asian community, and police aren't usually there, but they were doing their rounds, and I got stopped because I'd somehow forgotten that I needed to register my car. And when
mm,
he stopped me, you could see him saying all the things that could happen. And it's so weird. He was a white guy. He could see in my face. It was like he read my mind. And I thought, you just stopped me because I'm Black. Like, how did you know? And then he said, look, we get told the car registration and knowing
mm,
where you live and knowing there are a few others. So I was actually really grateful for that, is that he
the
knew that I was
explanation.
already thinking that I had been, I can't remember what the word is, but that literally they had looked out for me. And without us saying any words, he knew that. And, I thought I was going to get about 3 fines. I only got one. And I think
Mm,
that was him in kindness, making up for a world where police really do have, most of the time, the ability to be lenient with people depending on who they are. So I want to highlight that, we do have both sides of the coin, and it felt really good to actually experience the other side. But it was the fact that he knew by looking in my eyes that I thought, oh, this is, I can't remember what the word is, but anyway, yeah. Just
Yeah.
wanted to share
The
that just for balance.
No, and that's good. And I think in a way, I'm tempted to go on a tangent and say that
Let's,
those are the minimal experiences when it comes to like that grace that's offered to Black and brown people. But certainly, it's actually still great to hear those stories of how
mm,
there can be collaboration and it can be some kind of I guess, um, community cohesion, as I like to say.
yeah, love it. Community
So that's great.
cohesion.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, your words. I'm liking your words. As the kids out there do, I'm definitely liking that. Love it. Community
For
cohesion.
sure, for sure.
Mm,
Okay, last one,
yeah.
because I've got so many, but I'm like, okay, let me think what will be the best way to end this and to borrow from you with a balanced
Yeah.
approach, because I know we've skewed more towards the questioning or letting it go.
Mm,
So maybe I'll keep it to the last statement being success means being balanced.
for me, yeah, I'd keep that one.
Yeah,
I'd
yeah.
keep that one.
See,
Yeah.
I'm able to balance it out a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I know. It's fun. I mean, that could have gone another way, but had you'd asked me 7 years ago, I would have
Mm,
said question it, because I was in the Tony Robbins world, who is, I'm sure he's got a
mm,
different title. He doesn't like just being seen as a motivational speaker, but really powerful, transformative coach. And I gave a lot of energy. It's the energy I got from the Tony Robbins world that allowed me to have my gym that I opened in a different part of the world and to do a
mm,
number of the things. But I found that I was burnt out and I was losing my feminine edge, which I
mm,
wanted in balance. So I'm
mhm,
now working. So even though I think I went more towards my feminine over the past couple of years, which is where I've
mm,
gone more spiritual,
mm,
and now that I finished my PhD, the entrepreneur in me is like, oh, what's the new thing I can build? But what does it
mm,
look like for me to build it without go, 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 which is one version of success.
yeah.
So I really want to test the model of balance. So in this
Mm,
moment, I'm happy to keep it.
yeah. Okay, and thank you for that explanation because and again this is making me think with the part two that we'll have is
Hmm.
just around actually understanding your journey into like the world that you were in because even as you're talking about the Tony Robbins and then owning a gym and then going into a cafe, those are all like prolific kind of steps to take, and some people actually might want to maybe not take the exact same pathway as you, but to be inspired to somehow
Yeah.
traverse the same way that you did in a way.
And if I can be honest with you, Tracy, as well, like sometimes I think, Yemi, are you making the most of this? And at the moment, my biggest leverage to speak
Mm,
to people is social media.
mm,
I'm not on the big billboards. I say yet, still question mark as whether I'd want that. I think I would,
mm,
but I think that's the ego. But at the moment, I'm my biggest agent. It's the
mm,
reason why I share, because nobody else is doing it, and I'm okay with that. But I wonder whether if I spoke more about the businesses I've done, I
mm,
would get more, because I know exactly what it is I had to do. The things I'm tweaking, I don't know if I'm
mm,
waiting till I create something with a different set of energy, and that's a balanced
mm,
energy of masculine and feminine.
mm,
But I just appreciate you saying that, because I also know that the divide between the wealthy, the rich, and the poor
mm,
is the gap is getting wider. So I think there are probably a lot of people who are trying to figure out um, well, what should I do? Should I be going harder? Like, I'll be honest with you, one of my sisters, I've got four, so I won't out who it is, said the divide's getting bigger. You got to pick a side. You better pick rich or
mm,
poor. And I'm like, whoa, I don't like that. But if I'm gonna pick,
mm,
I'm gonna pick rich. And then the question
mm,
is, what do I need to do to get to the rich? Am I
mm,
willing to put all of that in? So
mm,
I think that's probably the reason why there's a pause, but I know what I needed to do all the business ventures I've had, and
mm.
and I'm doing it differently this time, but it's uncomfortable. But that's
Yeah.
because I want to live a good life and I want to live long
Mm.
and sustainably.
Yeah, yeah. Interestingly, one of my statements was about comfortability, and you've actually kind of covered it now, which is usually growth happens in the discomfort anyway. So,
Yes, yes,
it's
absolutely.
actually so important to highlight that.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll transition now just to talk a little bit more about a particular research article that I shared with you. I shared with Yemi, Dr. Yemi, Breaking the Silence, a scoping literature review on trauma-informed care for Black women experiencing sexual health-related trauma. So this is by Dr. Ayana Troutman and colleagues from the States. So just a brief background about this particular topic is that it was a review article that was exploring mental health experiences of Black women, particularly around their trauma or sexual violence, stigma, and access to support. And the research was highlighting how something that we all know, but it's actually quite poignant whenever it's highlighted in research, is that racism, sexism, and cultural expectations can really affect mental well-being. So a
Mm,
few of the points I really liked and I was able to note down is that many Black women in this space really feel the pressure to appear strong, even when they are struggling emotionally. And this can really make it harder for a lot of people to ask for help or admit that they actually do need support when they're overwhelmed. And then they also talked about how trauma, including sexual violence, because that was one of the main themes, and ongoing stress can actually increase anxiety, depression, and emotional exhaustion, which
mm,
we all know, but I think sometimes it's actually, again, when research highlights it, because this is an amalgamation of a number of research pieces together, it really shows that like this is actually heavy weight and needs to be taken seriously for our people. So
mm,
many Black women end up carrying a lot of work and caregiving and community responsibilities, even whilst they're still actually experiencing racial discrimination or experiencing those sexual violence or any trauma really that they might have
mm,
actually gone through. So they were talking about then the fear of judgment and stigma within the community it still then actually stops these Black women from accessing help, even though they've got all these layered traumatic experiences and expectations that they've gone through. And then in these settings as well, most Black women, firstly, they'll think that the cost of therapy is quite expensive, so that's still a barrier. But in those spaces as well, the being misunderstood and being dismissed becomes a barrier in itself. And
mm,
oftentimes that's because of this cultural incongruency that's going on there. And oftentimes, as you know, there is a lot of bias that comes in. I wouldn't even call it bias, I'll call it racism that
mm,
happens in these therapeutic spaces as well. So it highlights or gives way to the importance of having culturally safe and responsive therapy that's available to these women who've experienced racism, sexism, or
mm,
sexual violence as well. So
mm.
that's the main kind of nutshell of
Yeah, no,
the
thank
paper.
you. Yeah,
Hmm.
thank you for that. So what made you share that with me? What do you wanna touch on or explore?
Yeah. So part of it was I was quite interested in the trauma element of it, specifically just around how, well, trauma element, but also how it kept on advocating for that culturally informed and
Mm,
trauma-informed care. Because oftentimes, as we know, when people come in or even talk about their trauma, and you touched on this a little bit earlier, Black women, firstly, are not believed or they are being very dismissed in these spaces. And when they do open up, there's no kind of care to their narratives or their
mm,
stories. It's just kind of like, oh, okay, well, sorry to hear that. Let's move on to the next thing rather than actually holding space and being able to
mm,
have these discussions. So part of it was trying to now understand from your kind of perspective and knowing that Black women are expected to carry a lot too much, what do you think culturally safe mental health support could look like to Black
mm.
women?
I think firstly is let's just acknowledge that there aren't enough Black mental health practitioners if we're
Mm,
focusing in Australia, or let's just
mm,
talk about the rest of the Western world in order
mm,
to respond
mm,
to that. And even just from an economical academic perspective, that it,
mm,
there just isn't enough. So we need to acknowledge that. As for me, as in, say, for instance, an engineer, a woman in engineering, the one thing I struggle with is when organizations are being given, you must get to 40, 60%, 40% women who your engineers should be women. And I'm like, okay, but do we
Mm,
have a data pool that can actually
mm,
commit to that? Because you're
mm,
putting this, so that's the first thing we need to acknowledge. So there's some work that needs to be done earlier on in the pipeline to see if this
mm,
is an offering we should be giving to
mm,
our kids and education. That's one bit. The
mm,
second one, I think, is every mental health practitioner should go through some sort of trauma informed and culturally trauma, not just culturally informed, because culturally informed is one thing, which is, for
mm,
instance, there could be, I didn't even know whether it's an East African culture of actually you can't actually speak to the wives unless their husbands are there. I'm just making this up. There are some cultures that are very specific.
mm,
That's one thing to be culturally informed,
mm,
but then to be culturally and trauma informed is different. So when I go
mhm,
back and look at my research, and I cannot remember, I'll make sure I come back. It might be J. Rupee, where you used to have ACE, adverse childhood events,
mm,
that
mhm,
impacts whether it's mental health or how you look at trauma, but that went into community of white
mm,
families. It didn't
mm,
necessarily talk, and even though I think it has happened to white people, but there's just a really deep forgetting of
mm,
colonization, of
mm.
genocide, of
Yeah.
wars that were not sanctioned by the UN. So
Mm,
that is a culturally trauma informed. We must add the trauma lens to it because
mm,
culture, we have different beliefs, different ways. And
mm,
then there's a whole heap of things that happens to a people that health
mm,
practitioners are not aware of. So that
mm,
should be standard, I think, across
mm,
the whole world.
mm,
And not just for us to be aware of Black, but for us to be more aware outside of the Western colonized lens. I want to talk about my
mhm,
friend, although we haven't spoken in a while, so she might say you're using this loosely, but Dr. Jennifer Milan, who wrote a book, Decolonizing Therapy, brilliant
mm,
book.
mhm, mhm,
And it's something that she really encourages practitioners, regardless of their skin tone or color,
mhm, mhm,
because the global majority around the world is not white.
mhm, mhm,
Um, and so having practitioners, regardless, once again, of if they're white, they could be brown, they could be Black,
mhm,
especially Black, are you culturally trauma informed? So I
mhm,
think that's one thing that can, well, two things that I've mentioned, which is to acknowledge that we don't have a like for like, we don't have enough
mm,
Black mental health practitioners, and for
mm.
everybody to be trauma informed and culturally trauma informed at that as well.
And that is so powerful because you're touching on a lot of points that we really see a lot in mental health. One being that, firstly, not enough practitioners, but I also really want to go back to something you said about the data pool for the quota for
Yeah.
engineering professionals that are women.
Mm.
What we tend to see as well is that even from a basic level, we don't have enough data to even indicate what's happening within like different communities. So
Yes.
I would even take it a step back and say, let's actually first understand like what's the problem happening in different communities because we currently, I think we collect data based on country of birth. I could be
Uh,
born here. But am I like an everyday or the dominant culture, which is white? No. And that my
uh,
experiences are completely different to someone who is actually white presenting. So
mm,
that's where I think I'm kind of taking a good fight right now with certain spaces, but it takes a
oh,
lot, and I think it needs to have that conversation that's ongoing. But certainly loved what you actually mentioned there.
it does, but you've opened another box for me, Tracy, which is now let me come with my decolonized lens and when it comes to research.
Mm,
And just, the beautiful crafting of your questions, which really is just so delicious to sew it all together. When you were asking me the keep it, challenge it, throw it away, or whatever it was, we did that game. There was something you said about what happens in the house stays in the house.
mm,
Part of the reasons why we cannot get the research data is because we're not willing to share what happens in the house.
mm,
Yeah.
mm, mm,
So that's
mm,
number one. Communities and people are not willing to share it or the whole
mm.
truth. Secondly,
There's
we
not enough
might need to,
safety.
yeah, correct. There really
Mm,
isn't. And remember, this
mm,
is not new. You know,
mm,
we let people into our villages and then they abuse or they take the natural resources. Or,
mm,
I go over to Nigeria and I see a whole new culture in there. And I'm thinking, oh, what's going on? Okay, they've sold a few things to a different country, or I hope our
mm,
governments have really done good. Like there's lots of things that we don't know if that happens. So we need to also apply a decolonized lens on,
mm,
okay, if for good reason, most of the time safety, we haven't shared information or we're not willing to share that much information
mm,
in a very colonized way of collecting data, What is the alternative? And that's what I think communities need to start doing. I do think lived experience needs to be really, really looked at. I was able to present some of my research before I graduated to Gabor Mate at his Research Foundation conference in Boston. It might have been last year or year before. And and that was one of the things. And I loved how gracious he was. He was questioning the validity because my sample size was very small. Um, and I was using a creative lens. Considering I'm an engineer, I thought, let me go creative because I don't think my ancestors would have had all this machinery, but there was a different way of collecting data. And so I think we need to start decolonizing the methodology in which we are collecting this data,
Yes.
and those of us who are sharing it to really be confident, because I challenged him back. I think he could see he wasn't going to win that one, so he referred me to someone else. But yeah. Anyway, I just needed to get that one out so we don't think there's only one way for science and
Yes.
research.
And I love that because I think what you're sharing there is what I think government, because this is at an institutional level where the data collection practices are very much westernized. And in that,
Mm,
for example, when you complete a form, well, in Australia, we don't really have the race and ethnicity fields, but you more or less use your country of birth to indicate whether you're diverse or not. Um,
mm,
so, in a way, how you've just described it there is we need to be more creative. And I actually really like that because I think sometimes when you kind of remove that colonial lens to it, I wouldn't even dare say that our ancestors had really great data collection processes.
totally,
I came
totally.
across something about the voodoo doll being
Mm,
used actually as a way to, so the needles that they were, I don't know how true this is, so I
yeah.
might just be sharing false information, but if it is true, I really like that approach. They use the voodoo doll and the needles to actually kind of like pinpoint whether some maybe test or some kind of medicinal herb that was provided to someone had helped cure their ailment. So, for example, if someone came in with a headache, and the person put a needle into the voodoo doll, they'll give them, let's say, chamomile. So, and if they
Mm,
felt like it worked, they will remove the pin. But if they felt like it didn't work, they'll keep the pin there and try something else until like they've been informed that something has actually worked. So I'm like, whether that's actually true,
it's
I,
not,
I
it's
would
not,
love that.
it's
Yeah.
not far-fetched.
Yeah, it's not
And this is
far-fetched. It doesn't sound
it's not far
far-fetched.
at all. If anything, I could just imagine my grandmother here say, yes, now this is what we
Yeah,
did, this is what
yeah,
absolutely. And
yeah.
this becomes the inquiry. And I know because I'm working with a group, I do some work with them, Science and Non-Duality, who have done a
Mm,
series of documentaries where they looked at about 7 indigenous cultures. And I'm so glad, I think one of them, they go somewhere in Eastern Europe. It's
mm,
not just about looking at the global majority, but what was the history of the global minority that we now perceive
yeah.
as white? Like what was going on, what were your indigenous cultures that you have
Mm,
forgotten because we've come into white privilege? Like there's so much wisdom regardless.
yeah.
And I think that's going to be the new research. And I think it's the
Mm,
likes of you and I doing it,
mm,
because unfortunately we still live in a world, like for instance, same to going to Bessel van der Kolk's conference towards the end, it was highlighting that when it comes to getting grants to do research, Black
mm,
and brown people struggle. We struggle
mm.
to get funding to
Yeah.
do
Mm,
grants. And in part, it's because we are wanted to fit into this box that actually
yeah.
goes against the very grain of how our ancestors collected data.
Yes. And unfortunately,
So,
to do research, you need to be affiliated with a university, which there's nothing wrong. And I love universities, don't get me wrong. But I
mhm,
think sometimes when you're trying to really have cutting edge research or
yeah,
undertake something that might be deprioritized in a university environment, can be
yes.
a bit challenging to do so. But certainly, kind of taking on from what you were saying, and I'm mindful of time. So I wonder for you, what do you think will be maybe the first steps for people to take if they want to kind of go into this new direction where it's about really trying to make a safe space for Black people to be able to open up, to be able to share, and to be able to be creative with their data collection?
The first thing is to get curious about how much you do not know, and that
Mm,
it is not a weakness, but an opportunity for immense growth to serve other people and to
mm,
excel in whatever field.
mm,
I love conversations with everybody, including a kid who has just started to learn to speak English, because there's so much I
Mm.
learn. So that's
Mm-hmm.
the first thing. And what, from liminal thinking, there's this theory of emptying your cup. No,
Mm.
whether, even just you referring to me as doctor, I'm like, oh, don't use it too much, because people might think like I'm a big deal, and like there's so much I don't know. I mean, I am a big deal, but there's so much I
Yeah,
don't know.
I was about to say, I'm like, but you know what? And one thing I've actually really appreciated in hearing you speak is your epistemic humility. So just knowing that there are things that you don't know, and like
Yeah.
you're a student of life as well, and you're continuing to learn from others, and you take various sources as a source of truth and learn teachings, you know. So it's great.
Thank
Mm.
you. Gosh, you gave it that big word. I can never say that word. Estimate, whatever. That word. Thank you. That means a lot for me, because I think oh gosh, I just say I love everything about this conversation, and the brilliance and the creativity and how it's all woven together. And this is
Mm.
where perimenopause snatches my thoughts.
Take your time. We'll.
I know. I'll come back to it. But actually, yeah, I wanted to thank you for that, because when we report research, and I'm happy to be told different, when people say we did research of 1,000 people, 15,000 people over 30 years, it is really based on beautiful evidence. I want to
Mm.
highlight that. I will never,
Mm.
but it is not the whole truth, nothing
Mm.
but the truth. It
Mm.
is a big data range, and it is valid, and based on all the methodologies, it is stellar, but it
Mm.
is not all of reality. And this is something in the decolonizing lens, and even if it's in our language, what is true today, Tracy, whether we have all the data or
Mm.
not, might not be true in 10 years. The
Mm.
research that was done on smoking and what it does to people, the research that's been done on these new GLP-1s that are changing the whole narrative of wellness so I think that's something else we need to just start getting used to. And yeah, say
Mm.
I'm an expert in this field, and we own it. And I get it. Once again, it might be just culture, but I think
Mm.
we have to leave room. So that's what I'll be
Mm.
offering, is leave room for the unknowns, so
Mm.
that you can get to learn a bit more. And the other thing I would say is, I dare you, and this comes from liminal thinking again, associate yourself with people who are not from your obvious crowd,
Mm.
especially the ones who have thoughts, especially whether it's research or data, that you just cannot agree with, that you think is
Mm.
absolute nonsense. Because what you do then is you start to expand your brain and capacity to think creatively. Because I'm not suggesting that you will agree with them, but if you
Mm.
were in their shoes and you have experienced what you have done and the lens in which they've gone on whatever they're doing, could you understand it? Now, let's
Mm.
acknowledge you're not. Therefore, how can we open the creativity to give something different to the people you serve? There's a lot in there, but I think whatever
Mm.
people need to get from
Definitely.
it, they will take.
Yeah,
I think that'd
no,
be
there's a
very
lot, and
powerful.
I'm like so many questions coming from that, but I'm like, okay, let's keep it tight. Let's keep it tight. But
There'll be
certainly,
part
I think
two.
it's
Part two is coming.
fantastic. Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you so much for that. And we have a tradition where we like to just ask about the things that keep you mentally well, and those are viewed as tips as well that can be also imparted onto the viewers and the listeners. So, what are
Mm,
three things that keep you well? And I know you touched on them a little bit earlier before, but curious
mm.
as to how you'd kind of concisely put them as three.
Oh, this is really good, but okay, so I get the download. So it tends to be body, body, mind, which could just
Mm-hmm.
be body and mind. So I do things that keep me mentally well is my body, because of how much our minds are taxed with
Mm-hmm.
thinking and doing. I let
Mm-hmm.
my body do the thinking. So whether that's dancing or
Mm-hmm.
fitness, that's really, it does
Mm-hmm.
something to my brain. And then mentally, what keeps me mentally well is these kind of conversations. When you sent this inquiry, I was really grateful it came. It kind of gave me a 2 to 3 month lag, which is what I always love and need. Um, and I'm getting more mindful on making sure I speak about the things I want to, because
Mm-hmm.
you gift me.
Mm-hmm.
I've tried not to get too animated, but the questions you've asked me, my brain has been having an absolute field day, a party. Like I might not listen to all of it, but I'll get the transcripts and say, okay, Yemi, what was it that opened up for you? Which is why I share in real time a realization or a vulnerability
Mm-hmm.
of not knowing something. So anything to do with the body, but more so the body, because of how much I do as a speaker. I don't always want to be talking. So
Mm-hmm.
I let my body lead, and that's been really powerful. What I think what the world has called somatic. somatic
Mm,
healing is really good for my
yes.
mind.
And it's our familiar way of speaking, actually. That like
It
it's actually
is.
for Black people, we are
It
so somatic in our expressions. Like, so it's
totally.
actually something so inherent. So it's not foreign to us at
Oh
all.
gosh, no, I'm so glad
Mm,
you said because I've been dancing on social media and there's the judgment of the friend who I went to uni with who's going to send it and say, "Oh, Yemi's lost her mind," and I'm like, "No, actually, I'm just trying to remind you of what
yeah.
not even our ancestors, your grandmother
Mm.
did, right?"
Yeah, and the fact that like you actually do feel, I don't know about you, but I know when I'm in nature, for example, or even like when I'm doing something like remotely cultural, I just feel a connection to ancestors, and I feel like okay,
Yeah.
there is some kind of embodiment that's happening here as I'm
Yes.
doing these particular activities.
Yes.
Yeah, so no, it's great. I love it. Okay, so the body and the mind for you,
Yes.
you're
Yeah.
trying to keep yourself well in that sense. Okay,
Yes,
no, thanks for
totally.
sharing that. And lastly, because this is a Black mental health podcast, we'd like to shout out any Black person, organization, or even businesses, and you can shout yourself out too. So,
Mhm.
who would you be betting on this time around?
I'll be Faith Agugu, healing.
Yeah.
Is it Healing Conversations? I think that's the name of her business. I know she's got a few others, but Faith Agugu, and Dr. Paul Pousset.
Mm,
Um, they have both been. Oh, and there's another one, Dr. Xavier Mulenga.
mm-hmm,
They and obviously because I've done quite a few I've done quite a few documentaries, and it's just so beautiful to have access to them. They have
mm,
been profound to the healing of my family and I in Australia. They are
mm,
the reason why um, we can keep going out with our head held high. So
mm.
I want to give them a shout out. I'm not quite shy in talking about me, so I won't even highlight myself because I'm already highlighted. But those three, definitely.
No, oh, thank you so much, Yemi, and I appreciate that. And it's always good for other people to hear about the Black people that are doing prolific work in the community. But thank
Totally.
you so much, Yemi, for your time, your energy, and the movement that you're building. I know people can find you online, but where do you want them to find you? I know you've got your website.
Yeah. Instagram is best. It just feels like the community that it feels like this virtual space I've created of
Mm,
wholesomeness where we can
mm,
disagree and love on each other in the most respectful way.
nice.
So I would really love that. And I'm trying to get to 10,000 followers. I think it's an egotistical request, but I'm trying to get there. Currently just under 8,000, but I'm
We
liking
can
the
do it.
idea of it. Yeah, let's do it. So I'd love to connect there. I'm also on LinkedIn. I definitely put a lot of conscious stuff when it comes to leadership and gently agitating the systems. So either of those two are great.
No, thanks so much for that. And to everyone listening, if today's episode resonated, please like, subscribe, and share it, and leave a rating. See you next time.